Martial arts has infected every form of media right now.
It's almost like a fever that you catch.
It's a virus that's spread everywhere.
We're not fully aware of it being there anymore, it's just there.
You know, you watch a commercial, you watch a soap opera, a music video, a kid show.
So many video games, so many films.
In music and dance.
And it's a universal language.
But everyone takes what they need from it.
We've twisted it. We've remixed it.
It truly has evolved tenfold.
I would never have believed that Keanu Reeves would do Kung Fu, that a Kung Fu movie would win an Oscar. That just seemed impossible. Whoa. Kung Fu films are art, beauty, movement, legacy. There's history.
They were based on Peking opera. If you've ever seen an authentic Peking opera performance, it's beautiful.
The beauty and the artifice and the elegance and the style are all exactly what it's about.
It was just all there, like a dance, like a performance.
Oftentimes, the plot itself is based on inherited stories which are passed on generation to generation. This was also carried forward into the 20th century, particularly in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, 100 years ago a rocky, inhospitable island, is today one of the world's busiest and most crowded cities. Her new buildings match her new industries, producing goods which are sold across the world.
Hong Kong was a place where everyone went, and they went there to make money. And in the 60s, Hong Kong became a manufacturing base, and people working in cement factories, artificial flower factories, button factories, radio factories. Everything was light industry.
I mean, Hong Kong then and now is always a very stressful place to work, to live. And so people just want to have fun, and going to the movies is almost like a community or family gathering sort of event.
Hong Kong was a British colony. For them, filmmaking was not merely an exercise in entertainment, but it's also a way of postulating their Chinese identity.
There had been movie studios in Hong Kong before Shaw Brothers, but Shaw Brothers was the Death Star of Hong Kong movie studios.
Run Run Shaw sits in this remote corner of the Commonwealth doing what Hollywood would love to be doing. Making a film every week of the year and a profit at the end of it. He controls the world's largest privately owned studio and cinema circuit and an annual income of £100 million.
I can guess what the people want better than most of the other producers.
They would make movies, and more of them. They would own their stars. They would own their actors. They would own their own fan magazines. They would own their own sound stages and composers and editors and cameras and lights and everything. It would all be done in-house. And what Shaw was making was what was popular. Adaptations of Chinese operas. Adaptations of classical works. There were a few spy movies. A lot of romance and musicals. Shaw Brothers decided at the end of the decade to move away from these graceful, fanciful movies and instead bring gritty realism and exciting combat.
Kung Fu took the passion of opera and you combine it with the athleticism and the acrobatics of ballet.
The Shaw Brothers, to me, it was like Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments, that rich technicolor, and you could just escape.
The
Shaw Brothers had this way of everybody kind of understanding how the genre should look, feel, sound, how people should be performing. They just knew it all. They were all experts in it.
Watching Shaw Brothers films, what impacted me the most was I thought the sound effect of the sword fighting was nice.
The way the sound was designed was an important, integral part of what made that genre tick. People would still sit live in front of the screen with a master recorder rolling at the back and literally perform the sound effects in sync with the action, with the choreography. They would frequently have 3 guys in front of the mixing console, each with a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and they would quickly grab a roll of tape, lace it up, and fire it off in real time, live, whilst they were watching the film. A couple of guys in there that had been in there with the cigarettes going constantly. They'd have been in there for probably the last, 72 hours. The mindset here was, you guys are in this room, you're not leaving this room until you finish this film, and by the way, there's 3 more coming in.
Night shifts right after day shifts, and then day shifts again. I had this record of me shooting 6 films at the same time.
It was a factory, and there were actors, stuntmen, technicians who lived in dormitories.
That's how they could crank those out. People were making 2 or 3 pictures at a time.
If you have them living in the dormitories here, you have much more control over them, of course.
Yes, of course. We know their movement, the time they leave the dormitory, time they come back. And if they go out too much, we ask questions.
You worked for Run Run Shaw. And of course, you were also beneath Mona Fong, who became his sort of girlfriend and later became his wife, who also became the head of Shaw's production. And it would be hard to find a woman more hated or more important in Hong Kong film history. Mona Fong knew how to watch the bottom line, and she would do things like tell them to cut their costumes from floor length to knee length, cut their spears from 6 feet to 3 feet, leaving the director who showed up the next day flummoxed as to how he was going to make a 3-foot spear look at all threatening on screen. Shaw Brothers' big problem in the 70s was that they were too big. They were too powerful. They had no reason to second-guess their decisions because all their decisions had been right for a really, really long time. And so when someone came to Shaw Brothers and said, we got this guy, Bruce Lee, maybe you want to try him out and hire him, Run Run Shaw thought, you're just a kung fu guy, screw off.
That was the biggest mistake. It's like not signing the Beatles, right?
Hong Kong was extremely male-driven, and movies were originally made only for housewives. So they didn't want the housewives going and lusting after handsome guys, so all the women played the leading heroic characters.
One of the first big on-screen heroines coming out of the late 60s was Chang Pei Pei, who was in King Hu's Come Drink With Me.
When I come to Hong Kong, everything so strange to me. I decide to go into movies only because dance training. The dance make the fighting more feminine.
She saw fighting as dancing, and you could clearly see it in the movie that fighting was dancing.
I mean, the funny thing is that often kung fu films are looked down on by the cultural elite. But this is the same thing as ballet.
Gradually, it became like my own style.
The image of Cheng Pei Pei surrounded by men and then absolutely annihilating them. It's so striking because it was happening in these Hong Kong films way before it was happening over here.
People don't want to see always a woman in a pretty dress. I always loved the fight.
In the older days in Hong Kong, they actually show a real martial artist actress like Chen Pei Pei, who actually can do the action, you can have longer takes, you can do more complex stuff.
I don't know, it's just something special to me at the beginning. I'm playing a girl who knows how to fight. From that on, I fight all the time, all the movie.
Three straight days of street rioting in the crowded Kowloon Peninsula of Hong Kong bring out scores of police.
1967 was a year Hong Kong was on fire when there was a strike by some workers at an artificial flower factory. And the police came in, they were a little heavy-handed, the word spread that there was police brutality going on, and Hong Kong erupted. 51 people died in clashes between protesters and police. Journalists were attacked and burned to death in their car. It was a crazy, crazy time.
Police said the rioters' sole aim seemed to be an attack on any and all authority.
The spirit of the movies that came out of this were about angry, young, pissed off people who had nothing left to lose. So they made One-Armed Swordsman, which is basically about a young man. His father is killed, and he's left with the only relic of his father is a broken sword.
Director Chang Che could see that the classic Shaw Brothers sword movie had become kind of staid and pedestrian. We should try something different. We should have more blood. We should run a sword through somebody and then see it sticking out the other side. We should sever a few limbs.
You have entrails being pulled out of bodies on camera. What do you do for an encore?
People say it's not exciting enough. We're putting more blood.
And in his fight scenes, he shows the beauty of violence, especially when he uses slow motion when a character dies.
Chang Che liked machismo. He didn't want to see women on screen. He wanted to go back to the old school male heroes, usually with their shirts off and their man boobs greased.
He got rid of the yin gang, the women, and put in the yang gang, the manly, manly men who liked other manly men.
He loved boys standing back to back and taking on all odds as their guts spill out on the floor. He loved bloodshed.
Director Chang was quite a serious person. He would scold some of the crew, but he never did it to me.
One-Armed Swordsman captured the tenor of the times. It was an angry young man standing up to authority with nothing but a broken sword in his fist.
That imagery of the innocent fighting the oppressor, the poor versus the powerful.
That instantly got a response at the box office that was fresh.
So Jimmy Wong Yu had a brainstorm. He thought, well, if we fight with swords in these movies, why can't we do it with fists and use Kung Fu? And why can't we fight the people who really hacked me off, the Japanese? So he was allowed to develop a script and direct it, and he made The Chinese Boxer. And that started this enormous trend for Kung Fu movies. Everyone wanted to see young, pissed-off Chinese guys, but now they weren't fighting martial arts masters with swords, they were punching Japanese oppressors in the face with their fists. This was massive.
It's the sheer physicality of Hong Kong cinema at its best. We've all been picked on, we've all wanted to beat up the bullies, and in a Kung Fu movie that can happen.
These movies really tapped into something in Hong Kong. People wanted to see this. They didn't owe something to the man. They owed something to the people they stood shoulder to shoulder with every day at the bus queue, at their office jobs, at the factory, on their streets. This explosion of filmmaking in Hong Kong in '67 captured this youth energy, this spirit of you can do anything. You can make the world stop and pay attention to you with nothing more than your bare hands. And that idea spread from Hong Kong. It electrified audiences in America.
It's the height of the civil rights movement in America. It's the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement. There was all sorts of youth in rebellion going on everywhere.
Sometimes action speaks louder than words. Actually, a lot of time it is.
It's about some primal stuff. It just permeates all borders.
Fighting is very universal, but the vocabulary of it has to have the right timing.
You know, things are going to resonate, and you don't know what it is.
I'm going to take this right foot, and I'm going to whop you on that side of your face. And you want to know something? There's not a damn thing you're going to be able to do about it. Really? Really?
Billy Jack came out, and he did a scene where he's standing alone, and he's got about 8 people around him, and he just does these kicks and gets out of it somehow.
I just go piss. This is why they're talking about Billy Jack.
He was a Vietnam vet. He was a heroic guy because he was willing to put his life down to save others.
He wasn't only beating people up for the sake of it, he was actually defending the American Indians who were his friends, and he was an American Indian.
That's what Billy Jack did. He was a step above just defending yourself. Studios released it, lost money in a couple of theaters, gave it back to Tom Laughlin. He re-released it, grossed $100 million in the 70s.
That sort of ordinary guy hero resonated universally with people, particularly working class people.
I think I've seen it about 3 times. This is the 2nd time for my children.
We've had people come back 8, 10, 12 times.
We all decided to come back and see it again.
In America, in the Western world, I believe he would be the first martial art action hero, Billy Jack.
About 80% of these movies is a guy who's your average Joe Schmo. It was always a fight against something, whether it was oppression or tyranny or, you know, fascism or government. There was always a fight, even racism. But before the movies, we had Bruce Lee, of course. All of us like Bruce Lee. That was a big deal for us.
When the real rock star of Kung Fu emerges, Bruce Lee, so many guys wanted to be that, man.
Bruce Lee, I think, is the Kung Fu savant. Very early on, he knew what road he was going down.
He was part English, part Jewish, and part Chinese. So when he was growing up, he was discriminated in Hong Kong from both sides. And when he got to America, he wanted to be the hero. And he was the first person to come to America and say, I want to create essentially the archetype, which is the Chinese Kung Fu master. He got his very first part as Kato in The Green Hornet.
The Green Hornet started as a Batman spinoff. So you had the Green Hornet and Kato appearing on Batman, also helped bring martial arts and definitely Bruce Lee into homes in the US.
As a kid, I was wondering why people were looking over our fence when my dad was working out with Uncle Bruce. They kept saying, Kato, Kato, Kato. They absolutely connected with that.
Bruce Lee appeared on television, and I was like, whoa, I kind of like that.
Every other little kid the next day was like, what just happened? How cool was that guy that just kicked the guy across the room? Who the hell was he?
And a lot of people would imitating Bruce Lee moves on the street. Friends of mine started taking up martial arts as a result.
And then right after, I was really attracted to the Kung Fu series with David Carradine because I grew up on Westerns. I love my Westerns.
There had been a long string of Western television shows in the US. Gunsmoke, Bonanza. By the early 70s, it was starting to fade. When Kung Fu first came on, it seemed like another Western show, but with kind of a unique spin.
What we have to remember about the time is this is the counterculture. This is at the height of the Vietnam War. And so in many ways, doing a TV series about China was code for doing a TV series about Vietnam. The Asians are the peaceful ones. They're wearing kind of pajama clothes. And then you got the cowboys, and they're the stand-in for the U.S. military.
Gentlemen, I'm going to bust your head.
It was picking up a cult following, especially among young viewers.
because you could watch it and feel like you were part of this kind of countercultural protest.
I really don't think anybody, even myself, had any idea how big a thing it was.
To see Kung Fu in a Western setting, to me that was like, whoa, I used to collect the Kung Fu trading cards and stuff like that.
Before the TV show was on, who knew what Kung Fu was? But after that show...
You have this explosion where everyone becomes interested in this Chinese or Asian culture, martial arts.
I mean, David Carradine and those guys did a good job, I must say, but it just felt a little weird because, is this guy really Chinese? You know what I mean?
Well, in Hollywood at the time, there was only one Eurasian Kung Fu master, right? There was just Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee faces a real dilemma. He's on the verge of stardom in the United States with a projected TV series on the horizon.
And he had this idea to do sort of an Eastern Western Kung Fu kind of movie.
How else can you justify all these punching and kicking and violence except in that period of the West?
They were interested in talking to him about it and thought it was a great idea, but they also realized that his accent would keep them from putting him on screen.
And then suddenly Warner Brothers comes out with a series that looks a lot like his series.
Bruce Lee was crushed by this because he saw this as his big shot.
Well, Bruce actually went to China because he didn't get that role. And he said to himself, well, if I can't get this part, what am I doing in Hollywood?
They needed an actor who looked a little more Western and who sounded Western.
When they interviewed David Carradine, the first audition, he was completely high and blew the audition. They still gave him a second audition.
Now, I could do the David Carradine Asian accent. Talk very slowly. That's all he did. That was his accent. I must go to the mountain to meditate.
Did you already know Kung Fu or Karate? Were you,
I heard the word twice before.
So, a drug-addled white guy who doesn't know any Kung Fu gets the part, whereas the Eurasian Kung Fu master, who's the most famous martial artist in the history of the universe, doesn't get the part.
Hey, it's America, you know, where they would do those kind of things. It's amazing how America finds a way to put that old wine in a new bottle.
Once World War II happens, Asian Americans are no longer allowed to have lead roles, even when they're casting Chinese character parts. For example, Fu Manchu or Charlie Chan.
Hiding place discovered. One wax figure suddenly developed telltale scars on back of...
They cast white guys in yellow face. The yellow face era is underplayed. It's a really horrible part of Hollywood tradition.
Growing up, watching TV or any other films, there was very little representation of Asians in a great light. You know, generally they're like the houseboy or somebody taking care of somebody, or
Asian women are either very oversexed or they're dragon ladies or what have you, and then the guys are, gang members or what have you.
When I started, I definitely tried to veer away from martial arts in that I was afraid. I was afraid that it was going to be stereotypical. But why is that a problem? There's nothing inherently wrong with an Asian character doing martial arts. It's just when an Asian character is reduced to nothing but martial arts.
It's the idea of just wanting to be sort of three-dimensional and be heard. We just don't all just do Kung Fu, right?
In the late 1960s, early 1970s, most film companies were going bankrupt around the world because of the advent of color television. But in Hong Kong, a group of executives, senior executives from Shaw Brothers, Raymond Chow, Leonard Ho, Peter Choi, decided that they had a different vision for where the film industry should be going. And their mantra was basically, if you make good films, people will come to see them. And so they left and they set up a little company called Golden Harvest.
Golden Harvest knew the way Shaw Brothers didn't, that the future wasn't martial arts, the future was stars.
We had a very small handful of actors that we were working with, the most important being a young American actor by the name of Bruce Lee.
He was a ticked-off dude who knew he had something in him, but he couldn't get anyone to believe in him. He was perfectly positioned for Western expansion because he knew how to be a movie star.
Are you going to stay in Hong Kong and be famous? Or are you going to go to the United States and be famous? Or are you going to try and Eat your cake and have it too.
I am going to do both. In the United States, I think something about the Oriental should be shown.
Bruce and I became friends because we had a lot in common. I could understand some of his aspirations of wanting to make films for the international market.
What's interesting about Bruce Lee's early movies is they really sort of serve as a metaphor for his career.
If you look carefully at The Big Boss, you will see it was a screen test.
Because originally, James Tan is supposed to be the star of the movie.
One of them has to die in order to make the third act work. Who do you kill off? The director sent the dailies back to Hong Kong. They looked at him and they said, kill James.
The Bruce Lee style of fighting was completely innovative for Hong Kong. The director wanted him to do the sort of traditional Chinese opera style of martial arts choreography, which is like clack, 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 like that. And Bruce wanted to do a kind of cha-cha-cha dance. You know, 1, 2, 3, kick. 1, 2, 3, kick, pause.
Bruce Lee loved to dance because he was focused on tempo.
He also, wanted the fastest choreography yet seen in Hong Kong cinema.
He was the one that would throw a punch and almost make it seem like it lasted 3 seconds longer. He was like, that was about the intent that I don't need a second punch. Everything is about finishing the fight.
And the director hated it. He's like, I need to fill a whole movie. The script was only 3 pages long. He actually called up Raymond Chow, the director, and said, you need to fire this guy. And Bruce called up Raymond Chow and goes, you need to fire the director.
And Bruce went on to become the star of that movie. The movie worked.
Long story short, Big Boss comes out, smashes all the box office records in Hong Kong ever.
Casual bystanders enjoy a lunch hour of controlled violence during a karate demonstration in Manhattan. These are experts, of course, so nobody winds up in the hospital.
One thing that really ticked off Bruce Lee was that in the US, karate was big. Everyone wanted to take karate. Chinese Kung Fu, people are like, what is that? So Bruce Lee then made Fist of Fury about how Chinese Kung Fu can beat up any number of Japanese karate masters at any time.
Fist of Fury represents the most nationalistic anti-Japanese movie ever made in Hong Kong history.
Because there are 2 scenes in that movie. Bruce Lee's walking past a plaque that said, no dogs or Chinamen. And he kicks the plaque off the wall, breaking it.
When they showed that scene, people just start cheering, applauding.
Hong Kong audiences went crazy.
That scene had never been shown before in Hong Kong.
That sign existed in America, except with no blacks and no Mexicans or whatever. People saw that as, oh yeah, I know that. The Bruce Lee and his tribe was the same as our tribe.
I guess they just kind of associate the people that are on the screen like someone they knew.
And the second, there's a scene when Bruce goes back into the dojo to challenge the Japanese, and there's a big Chinese calligraphy that says, sick men of Asia. And Bruce, he looks at the Japanese and says,
That line caused audiences to roar and come off of their feet in Hong Kong.
Because it struck a chord of Chinese nationalism. Not patriotism, but nationalism.
Chinese people are not sick men.
And Bruce and Raymond and everybody there were very quick to realize that there was an undercurrent. Our Hong Kong audiences were enjoying seeing the Chinese stand up to the ugly foreigners.
It suggests if you have enough skill with your fists and your feet, you can overcome injustice.
A strong, proud Chinese man who was going to punch his way out and get the respect he deserved, not by asking for it, but by taking it.
Bruce Lee brought it to a world stage.
He was speaking to the oppressed of the world in a way that he fucking meant it. There's no doubt about it.
The heroes in Kung Fu movies weren't strong men. They weren't John Wayne. They were ordinary guys. Small, wiry, poor, peasants, workers, who, because of their skill learning Kung Fu, and putting the time and effort into training, were able to overcome oppressors.
Everyone feels like an underdog, Everyone likes to see, the oppressed get, rise up.
And I think seeing somebody do that on screen is so inspiring.
No one wants to watch the film about the guy who's got everything and is successful at everything and succeeds at everything,
He'll never make it up here.
We all want to root for the underdog.
You had Bruce Lee doing the same thing. He was going to stand up to these forces that were trying to keep him down.
After Fists of Fury, Bruce Lee is a full-fledged star. And he's like the Steve McQueen of Hong Kong. He wants to direct, write, and star in his own movie. So he makes Way of the Dragon. He calls up Chuck Norris and says, I want you to be the bad guy. And Chuck goes, which one of us gets to win? And Bruce says, I get to win, I'm the star. Way of the Dragon represents Bruce's happiest time as an artist because he was in control of every aspect of it.
Uncle Bruce, one of the reasons why he decided to write and direct and produce his own projects also was he saw that the medium was a way of expressing his philosophy.
Learn everything you can from everyone and everything you can.
And then picking and choosing what fit best for him.
The fight with Chuck Norris, that was really about watching a fight and seeing the strategy of the fighter change as the fight went on. The good guy's getting hammered, then he started to change his cadence and his footwork. I mean, suddenly the strategy changed. Now the whole pendulum tilts. That's interesting because now you have a story within the fight. It's how do I defeat adversity? I'm getting overcome. How can I change my strategy, my mindset, and everything else, my physicality, to now come out on top? Where he ends up beating, where he wouldn't have if he'd stayed the same strategy in the beginning, is the point.
The fight scene is considered the classic martial art fight scene of all time. And I got a letter one time, a guy wrote, because there's a scene where I throw Bruce to the ground, and he grabs the hair on my chest. He says, did Bruce really pull the hair out of your chest? He said, if he did, you're really a stud.
I grew up when the Bruce Lee movies were ridiculously badly edited, so the entire alleyway scene was missing. So Bruce Lee walks out into the alleyway and then walks straight back in, and I thought, oh, it's meant to be some joke. He's so fast, he can do it.
Get him!
In that scene, it's very believable that Bruce Lee is totally invincible, and I think we all want to be invincible, in our imagination at least.
That movie cost $145,000 to produce. It's grossed over $60 million worldwide.
We were very fortunate. We caught lightning in a bottle. Golden Harvest understood there was a world out there.
But Shaw Brothers didn't care about the West. They poked their heads over there and didn't like what they saw. It was confusing. It was a very different market. But when Warner Brothers picked up their movie Five Fingers of Death and released it in the US, that was a huge hit.
Leo Greenfield from Warner Brothers said, look, I got a picture I want you to look at. I'd like you to come across and screen it with me and tell me what your thoughts are on it. I turned around and said to him after it was finished, it is nothing but money.
It had been picked up by Warner Brothers and distributed kind of almost as a test to see if there was a market for this kung fu stuff.
There were big ads for it in the papers, a free screening that night. And it was a packed house. Nobody knew what to expect. In the first scene, an old martial artist leaps up in the air and kicks two opponents in the head at the same time, and the crowd just went nuts. And they would jump up in the air and exchange blows in midair. Everyone was just sort of dazzled by it. It was more intense fighting than we'd seen, hand-to-hand fighting than we'd seen in the movie before. The fight was the raison d'etre for the film, and the intensity of it. They were hooked. They sat there. They were, they wanted to see what would happen next. They were emotionally invested in what was going on. And then as the crowd was coming out, they were clamoring for it. You could see they were really excited by what they'd just seen. And they wanted anything to get their hands on, posters, buttons, stickers.
Everybody was telling everybody to go see that movie.
The first martial art movie I saw was Five Fingers of Death.
Five Fingers of Death?
Five Fingers of Death.
Five Fingers of Death?
Five Fingers of Death.
And I was too damn young to be in that movie, and it freaked me out a little bit because they were pulling eyeballs out.
You know how many times I watched that movie? A million times, right?
No one had ever really seen anything like it.
Its success was so, huge for Warner Brothers.
It instantly launched all these smaller independent distributors into a mad scramble.
And there were quite a few in the hopper. I think they had them waiting
to get the next movie they could dub into English.
It looks easy.
Trim out the fat a little bit and release in grindhouse theaters all over the States.
I would pick up an average of 6 or 7 of these a year. We would find that they had adopted famous American soundtracks from famous American songs and dropped them in the picture. I can remember buying, in a short period of time, 4 pictures that had the Shaft soundtrack in it. I had this picture called Queen Boxer, which was full of barbaric action. The putting out of eyes with cigars. So I wanted to design a campaign that had a palm of a hand out here and 2 large eyes and blood dripping down. But what do I do with this female character? And instead of Subgum Chow Mein, let's make her Judy Lee. Give them advertising. It's like a 2x4 across the bridge of the nose. And that was very important to me because at one particular time, I controlled a lot of theaters on 42nd Street, the greatest film market in the world in those days.
You had 42nd Street between 7th and 8th, and it was all lined with theaters.
That whole strip was only 2 genres, pornography and kung fu.
It was a great spot for people to see things that they couldn't see in their normal neighborhood theaters. From 8 in the morning till 12 noon, $2 entry fee.
See 3, 4 movies back to back.
In real slimy theaters, but it was total pure fun.
Once you plunk down to watch a movie, those feet are not leaving where they are. They're stuck to the floor with old Coca-Cola. And there were rats that scurried back and forth. There's no way to know what's good or what's bad, so the only thing is just to park yourself in there and enjoy the ride.
It filled a niche. And what we actually discovered was it was more than a niche. There was a real hunger out there.
These films are now outgrossing U.S. films. Like, what is going on here?
As the joke goes, the only color Hollywood sees is green. Once they realized Kung Fu could make them money, they decided they would give Bruce Lee a shot.
When we did Enter the Dragon, it was the first Chinese Hong Kong U.S. co-production with a major studio.
They didn't trust Bruce Lee to be the only star of the movie. They had a white guy, a black guy, and an Asian guy because they were afraid that an Asian alone couldn't carry a movie in America. But I think the most important thing he did was, after the Hollywood crew left, the opening scenes of Enter the Dragon, all of that Bruce Lee filmed himself as the director and the writer and the star. And they put it at the front of the movie, and then you know he's the star.
But Bruce Lee took off his shirt and he started making cat sounds. Never seen anybody do that. He inspired me to want to do martial arts movies.
I was a timid person when I was a kid. I'm afraid of the dark and couldn't turn the lights off at night. After I watched his films, I thought, this is what a man should be. I learned we should overcome the things we are afraid of.
He genuinely invents the Kung Fu hero in the West. It would be like inventing the cowboy or the samurai. It's the equivalent.
Every teenage boy in America had 2 posters in his bedroom. One was a Farrah Fawcett in a red bathing suit, and the other was Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon.
It was the biggest picture, I think, in the world at the time.
So the studios knew that there was money to be made, but they hadn't really decided they're going to work with us or they're going to work with Shaw Brothers. The head of distribution at one studio looked at me and he said, "We'll never buy these movies. It's un-American. In our movies, the hero throws a punch and he pulls out a gun and shoots someone. It's just un-American to kick somebody. Your Chinamen are kicking people. Within 6 months, they were releasing Enter the Dragon and wanted to know if they could get more.
When you talk to people in Hong Kong of a certain age, just like people in the States all remember where they were when JFK was shot, everyone remembers where they were when they heard that Bruce Lee died.
In Hong Kong, 50,000 people fill the streets. In America, Enter the Dragon, of course, is released a month later. That's when he becomes a superstar. So what's interesting about Bruce Lee is he's the only icon of the 20th century who died young, whose fame was entirely posthumous.
He died, and he got stuck in time.
There was a blank slate. Bruce Lee was just this character on film, and his life could be essentially reinvented for his fans.
You can learn from his strengths and then be your own self. If he lasts for another 100 or 1,000 years, it means he's a religion of Kung Fu to an extent.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Like that, you see?
The late Bruce Lee must rank as the greatest martial artist of modern times.
After Bruce Lee died, it was the height of the Kung Fu boom. And suddenly Golden Harvest had lost their moneymaker. Hollywood had lost their moneymaker.
Hong Kong's like, what are we gonna do now?
Here's the 7 o'clock news. Bruce Lee, the world-famous film star, died last night of a sudden heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital in a coma.
Hey, that looks like, you know, Bruce Lee. I heard they brought him in.
And so what they decided the most respectful, meaningful, and classy thing to do?
Your name is Bruce Lee, too.
Yes, sir.
Would be to find a bunch of people who kind of sort of looked like Bruce Lee and get them to make sounds and do martial arts like Bruce Lee.
And they changed his name to Bruce Lai.
Bruce Le.
Bruce Lung.
Bruce Lee.
Or Bruce Tai.
You had Korean Bruce Lee impersonators, African-American Bruce Lee impersonators. They were coming out of the woodworks, and their movies were made fast and cheap and crappy.
And then it becomes this kind of whole Bruceploitation tradition. There are over 50 of these movies.
A veritable popping zits worth of movies just flooding the market like a tidal wave of crap. Nevertheless, the distributors counted on audience confusion to fill up the box office coffers.
When I was growing up, my father used to put out children pictures in Manhattan and surrounding boroughs. The house was on a mortgage, and so my father was saying, we really need to come up with a good gimmick to make something. Bruce Lee was the greatest thing I ever saw. Let's look into getting the Green Hornet, which was a TV show he was on. I said, can we take the series and edit it into a movie? He said, a great idea, but I don't think we can get the rights as he's a big star. Sure enough, my father flew to California and he got the rights because 20th Century Fox thought that the TV series was not successful. And they sent us 22 reels. I knew how to use the reel-to-reel and do all these things at like 8, 9, 10 years old because my parents were all in the movie business. We had a basement where we edited pictures. So I picked the 3 episodes, I cut them together, and then my father said, it's okay, we need to add more things. Added some sound effects, some other things.
Bruce Lee is heading for more thrills and danger than ever before. Bruce Lee is back.
My father had gotten on 42nd Street at one theater to start. There was a line around the block. And so I went and I said, this can't be for the Green Hornet, can it? He said, I don't think so. It was people standing in the aisles, screaming, cheering.
Thanks for the editorial.
And it was one of the most exciting things that ever happened. Everyone was perplexed by the success of it, but not me and my father. My father believed in me, and he made it happen. He had 2 phones in his ears. He's like, you want Bruce Lee? We got the Green Hornet. And it was a very exciting time.
The Bruceploitation movies are where you find a lot of awes, from awe-inspiring to awful.
Bruce was working on Game of Death when he dies. He'd filmed like 30 minutes of it.
After telling Bruce Lee's widow that he would take care of her and that he respected Bruce, Raymond Chow at Golden Harvest took Bruce Lee's footage he shot for Game of Death.
They edited, unfortunately, down to about 7 minutes. And then they had to come up with some script to surround it, and they totally tossed out Bruce's idea and came up with their own.
Raymond Chow hired a poor Korean guy that he renamed Tong Lung and used him wearing a paper Bruce Lee mask in some scenes to fill out the movie to discover who killed Bruce Lee.
So you got in here, finally. Before and after.
In the scenes made after he died, doesn't look at all like Bruce Lee. It kind of reminds me of the Plan 9 from Outer Space, in which they got somebody who didn't look at all like Bela Lugosi to play his part after he died.
You have to wonder how the Lee family felt watching someone pretend to be dead Bruce Lee on screen in such an inexpert and clumsy, ham-handed fashion. Right side by side with the real thing itself.
Watching it makes you uncomfortable, particularly since they cut scenes from Bruce's own funeral and put it in there. So they got pretty close to the line. The amazing thing about watching Game of Death is it's a bad kung fu movie up until the moment Bruce Lee steps on screen and you get to see his film. And it reminds you what it is when you see somebody who's a genius.
Since it had footage with Bruce Lee in it, it was a huge hit and made a lot of money, but I mean, it reeks of disrespect and grave robbing.
I was involved in about 6 Bruce Lee pictures. 3 of them actually had the real Bruce Lee in them, including Fist of Fear, Touch of Death. I had footage of Bruce at a very young age. I think it was less than 40 minutes of footage. So I had to get 90. So I had to build a picture around it.
Terry has a black and white film of Bruce Lee and then has a samurai film and wants to see a connection between the two of them. And I said, really? So he said, why don't we take that samurai film and make that the flashback to Bruce's great-grandfather? And I said, whoa, whoa, guys, wait a second. I said, Bruce is Chinese, samurai is Japanese. And they said, don't worry about it. We had these black and white scenes, and Terry said, oh, you can dub those, right? And I said, yeah.
Ma, you should have seen me in karate class today. I got my black belt. Hey, Bruce! Bruce! Jack! Sue, it's my brother. He's come home. Jack!
But then he wouldn't give me a script for the dubbing, because I was just making stuff up on the fly. I'm looking at the footage and saying, okay, so what's the guy saying? And he says, you know, it looks like, how do you want your steak? Medium rare. Oh, we're going with that.
She's got it all wrong. That isn't the way it was back then.
Fist of Fear, Touch of Death was an enormous financial success for us.
And I totally understand that some people may feel, you know, that this is totally dissing Bruce Lee and his legend. It was never my intention to go and trash the guy.
I was flying to Hong Kong to make a documentary about Bruce Lee, and everything was fine, and I got on the plane, and it touched down, and there was these big newspaper headlines, you know, Bruce Lee dies. I made relationships there, and I said, you know, if I come back with a good story and I could raise half the money in Australia, would you be interested in the other half?
Having done Enter the Dragon, we knew that it was possible to make co-productions, and that there was a way of doing a co-production in which you could come up with a story that would work for the traditional Chinese markets and should be able to work for the international market.
I thought, I'd like to make one of those, and maybe it would be fun to have a Chinese Dirty Harry sent down from Hong Kong on a routine extradition.
And so he wrote up this script, a terrible title. It was called The Yellow Peril.
Because I wanted to take a stereotype and turn it on its head.
Never met a Chinese yet that didn't have a yellow streak.
But it wasn't very funny here in Hong Kong, so the first thing we did was like, Ryan, change the title before we give it to anyone.
Anyway, that was the origin of The Man from Hong Kong.
Jimmy Wong Yu is the man from Hong Kong.
Jimmy Wong Yu was by then under contract with us at Golden Harvest, and we were really looking to build him up from what we had learned in the course of working with Bruce Lee.
Accompanied by his co-producer Andre Morgan, Asia's international superstar Jimmy Wang Yu arrives in Sydney to star in The Man from Hong Kong. Jimmy Wang Yu is regarded as Asia's Steve McQueen, a top action star whose films are tremendous hits all over the world.
And we have George Lazenby under contract. So Wang Yu can be the hero, George Lazenby can be the criminal mastermind. And of course that made me want to give the movie, Bondish aspects. Man from Hong Kong was the first Australian-Chinese co-production.
And it became part of the early experimental days of trying to mix Chinese and English.
This is Australia, mate. Don't give me any shit.
Golden Harvest Studios saw Sammo Hung was a rising star. He was to be the fight choreographer, and he looked different. He was fat, but it's all muscle. You actually hit that stomach and you hurt your fist. There's Sammo being taken to the Red Desert in the middle of Australia. He doesn't speak a word of English, and none of us speak a word of Chinese.
The next stage on our tour is Ayers Rock, the most famous rock formation in Australia, if not the world.
Naturally, that's where a drug dealer would go to exchange drugs 1,500 miles into the Australian desert. If you're trying to run away from being busted for drugs, do you run into the desert or do you run up a 900-foot rock? I think you should run up a 900-foot rock, really. Sammo and I were able to communicate with sign language and mock punches and so forth. So that is how we basically choreographed the fight on Ayers Rock.
Who sent you? Yeah, and I love you too.
I wanted the fights to be down and dirty, street fighting with Kung Fu. Prior to the R rating, you couldn't kick anyone in the balls. No. That was just not a gentlemanly thing to do. To hell with that. I'm going to put as many groin kicks as I possibly can into the fight scenes. And the infamous squirrel grip. It played in Hong Kong, but it didn't do the business that they'd hoped.
It didn't work in America because 20th Century Fox bought the movie and purposely put it on the shelf to protect another movie they had that was about hang gliding. And we had hang gliding in Man from Hong Kong, so they shelved it. They didn't want it released in America. But they had to release it because the theme song that we put on the movie was called Sky High, and it became the biggest selling song that summer all over the world. We made as much money off of the song as we made off of the movie. There was no way the movie could work for any market because it was neither fish nor fowl. You either make an American international movie in English or you make a Chinese movie and stop trying to mix the two. It doesn't work.
But those Golden Harvest movies resonated with certain communities, like the African-American communities, because it represented this kind of fight the power, fight the man spirit.
And the response in those theaters must have told them, these could work with black folks in America.
And at the same time, there wasn't too much for their audiences.
So we better give them a black hero.
Enter Jim Dragon Kelly.
Jim Kelly was someone that I looked up to very highly. He was a high-level martial artist.
It breaks my heart because he was so hurt by what the industry had done. He never got paid what he was due.
It's top priority. So am I.
Once I saw him in Enter the Dragon, I mean, he was the measure for all African-American young males that wanted to get into cinema. At that point, we realized that it could be done.
Introducing Ron Van Cleef as the Black Dragon. We said enough. Now we'll let him do the talking.
You know, you go to the movies, you see all these guys doing kung fu, and I said, you know, one day I'm going to do that. My father said, what are you talking about? Van Cleef, you are out of your fucking mind. Go get a job.
The assignment went to the most feared man in America, Ron Van Cleef.
So I quit my job with the police, and I went to Hong Kong. I was the first black man that headlined Hong Kong films, so I was an oddity.
This makeup?
No, baby, it's real shit. I didn't know you were interested in my face, but I am, you jive turkey.
When I saw the Black Dragon movies, I was just like, wow, another one did it. I can do this.
The movies were playing in Harlem, they were playing in Brooklyn, they were playing in Queens, they were playing in Long Island. It was such a big deal at that time. We even did live exhibitions for movies in Times Square. Sometimes I would cut 5 carrots on 5 people's throats with a sword, you know, during the intermission. I shot 10 films as the character of the Black Dragon.
These guys bothering you?
How can I ever repay you?
I'm sure Ron has some ideas of his own.
You have a string of movies where people of color are the heroes.
None of that jumping around and flying through the air, because this is the real shit.
You have all these black guys, cool, fighting the man and being the hero in the end of the movie.
What you wanted for little mama?
I ain't your mama.
They look good, too. They were, you know, cinema ready.
The Soul Sisters answer to James Bond.
You had the clothes, the looks, the hairstyles.
As black people, we could go to a film and see a reflection of us on screen.
So there was something up on the screen other than Joe Whitehead.
Gonna set me up?
I was forged in their image. Those were my heroes. That's what I wanted to become.
But what's interesting is that Warner Brothers was purposefully distributing their kung fu pictures that they had licensed from Shaw Brothers with their blaxploitation pictures.
They played a lot of the same theaters, blaxploitation movies and the martial arts movies.
They realized that those markets were very similar.
A great double bill would be a black exploitation pic repeated with an old kung fu picture.
The African American community were the ones that really supported, you know, Hong Kong cinema.
Well, pal, this South China seaport is not exactly like Brooklyn.
So parallel to New York City, in 70s Hong Kong, people were really poor. You went to the theater to escape for an hour and a half. Shaw Brothers created a dream world of ancient China.
The public want changes, and we will have to inject new ideas.
And throughout the 70s, they really had the tenor of the times. Lau Kar-leung, who had started out as a martial arts choreographer, he wound up directing movies for them that are considered, rightly so, some of the greatest martial arts movies ever made.
Bruce Lee gave the world the idea of Kung Fu, and it was really Lau Kar-leung who took on board this idea and ran with it.
Lau Kar-leung said, we should make Kung Fu films the way people actually practice Kung Fu. It's like Eagle Claw versus Tiger versus Panther in Lau Kar-leung pictures, where guys are doing 30 to 40 moves in one shot.
So when I'm watching a Shaw Brother film, what I like to do is count how long that scene plays out for until they cut. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The longer you count until that cut, you realize how incredible it is to pull that off.
There's a fight that moves into an alley that gets progressively narrower, and he's using a different style of martial arts.
At this range, I'll use my elbows.
For each exchange, as they move from walls that are 12 feet apart,
I call this the wire style,
to 8 feet apart, to 6 feet apart, to just a couple of feet apart. He's able to fit the style to the action on screen and the story.
I really believe that a film is always about the exchange of energy between the person in front of the camera and the audience. The great thing that they do is find the angles that work. As a cinematographer, that's an astonishing challenge because I don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know.
How is this superhero type of dude and this girl doing that fast? That was amazing to watch.
When Lau Kar-leung wanted to sell the speed, he wanted to sell the power, the impact, and he became concerned with having the audience feel it.
I respected Master Lau very much, and he was a hero in my heart.
One of the more outlandish, Peking opera-esque Lau Kar-leung movies was Dirty Ho. The title invariably makes people giggle, but Ho is the guy's name. Okay.
Dirty Ho is like almost like the ultimate example of like how complex and amazing you can get.
The masterpiece in that movie is in the wine shop. The great Wang Long Wai is serving him different wines that are named not only for their vessel,
Dragon Tiger wine,
but also for the Kung Fu style, which the two then attack and defend themselves with in a way that no one else in the White House knows it's going on. Very advanced, very high-level stuff.
He also made 36 Chamber of Shaolin with his blood brother, Gordon Liu.
The 36th Chamber of Shaolin. Classic, one of the best Kung Fu movies ever made.
Because it's about a hot-headed young kid who has to go into hiding to the Shaolin temple, and he decides to learn Shaolin Kung Fu.
Master, teach me Kung Fu.
He works his way through all chambers, 1 through 35.
Every stage, he needs to overcome a different challenge. There was one is using his head against the sandbag. Or having like candles and it was like moving his eyes. Martial artists, you have to overcome all these obstacles and you have to be disciplined, you have to be dedicated in your craft.
You must pass it, or you'll never go any higher.
When you see Rocky doing a training montage, when you see the 80s training montages coming out of this, it finds its original DNA in 36 Chambers of Shaolin.
I mean, you see him learning what he needs to learn, and you see him use it at the end.
It's fascinating to watch this, as slowly this person trains and goes from being a hot-headed brat to a focused, intense individual who's almost selfless in a way because he's learned that there's something larger than himself, which is Kung Fu.
We all had some obligation to make ourselves skilled. Because you can disarm me by taking away my gun, but you can't take away this.
North of the Brooklyn Bridge was this Alfred E. Smith housing project. I was a film artist at the time. One time there was incredibly powerful sound coming from the gymnasium. It turns out that this was a group of martial arts students. They said, "We really want to make a film with you."
The name of this film is Deadly Art of Survival.
And it was like an urban Kung Fu movie. A black guy who has a Kung Fu school in the Lower East Side gets into something with a rival guy from another Kung Fu school.
It was about the spirit and the mind becoming powerful through discipline.
My school, my style is better than your school and your style, so they eventually clashed.
It's a Kung Fu art film, and I always thought, hey, I'm serving up the community.
Any politician you know ever done anything worthwhile for this area?
No.
Nobody wants to fix these buildings?
Promise, and they ain't doing nothing.
Well, in that time, the Bronx was barren wasteland. Landlords used to pay gang members to torch the buildings for insurance money. In the middle of all this, you had the birth of hip-hop, you know, which gave us a chance to raise our hand and say, hey, look at me, I exist, and I got talent, I could do something.
Kids who lived in urban ghetto areas that would become a part of this movement called hip-hop, we all went to see these Kung Fu movies.
Chinese Super Ninja, 5 Deadly Venoms, Shaolin Challenges the Ninja, 10 Tigers of Canton.
Everybody watched Kung Fu cinema. MCs, DJs, no one could tell me that they didn't see them, because they did.
42nd Street, I hung out all day long, every day, in one theater, out the next.
I was there every Sunday.
There were people that were really funny in those movie theaters that said things at the right time, and the whole theater would die laughing.
You dummy, he's over there. Like, you better duck.
Sometimes films would mess up. Sometimes the audio would get crazy, but you hear strange things like,
yo, I didn't come here to watch no curtains. I came here to watch a motherfucker get his ass beat.
And a lot of times we would clown with each other, just bugging out off the fighting, choreography.
You're gonna watch it 4 times. Now, in the first round, you watch the feet. I'm gonna watch the hands. And you watch the throws, and I watch this. And we took turns isolating the movements so we could get these techniques.
A lot of these guys that were breaking were heavily into martial art films. 7 Grandmasters, my favorite. I based my whole career on 7 Grandmasters.
My good name depends on this. I'll oblige you.
What we saw on the screen was the very essence of hip-hop battling.
Come on, then. Why are you waiting? Right!
One breakdance crew challenging another breakdance crew from another part of town.
The power of style to defeat your enemy.
But it does have that kind of like face-off thing.
My style is better than your style was really where that all came from.
There was a recognition that the other person was their superior grandmaster.
You know, we know we're not grandmasters, but that's the whole innocent fantasy about it.
It was a recognition of respect. And what is more hip-hop than that?
To see these films with these amazing moves, just kicking ass in a brand new way.
They would see actors in Kung Fu movies on the ground, on their shoulders, kicking guys. The windmill was very similar to certain moves in Kung Fu movies. You can see guys doing those scissors kick stuff. In the intro credit scene in Spiritual Boxer, somebody does a suicide dive, which is a flip onto your back.
But there's another breakdancing from Brooklyn called Up Rock. And you're coming up and down, and you come up and you exchange, punch, 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 and you go back down and come back, exchange. And that is totally Chinese martial arts.
The drunken style, I adopted that fully. But I'll be honest with you guys, my whole entire style is drunken style.
They were already doing it, but it just expanded the vocabulary.
I mean, in a lot of neighborhoods, the dancing stopped the fighting drastically.
They're trying to say, well, look, I can do more than just steal and rob and stick you up.
It keeps me out of 2 places. It keeps me out of the poorhouse, and it keeps me out of your house. You know what I mean?
Every single one of us that's creating has this inspiration, and if we're really creating right, then we put an interesting flip.
They were sampling. It's about cultures talk to each other.
We've twisted it. We've remixed it and brought it back to you with a fresh new beat.
We are constantly talking across the water to each other.
Mismatched Couples is very interesting to this whole discussion. It's this movie about breakdancing in Hong Kong. In the intro, right, he's doing some popping and locking, like putting his shirt on and taking it off. He's doing some moonwalking.
It's amazing to see how this culture has combined with hip-hop, which it originally had an influence on, and then it could form and function in its own way.
Man, it's about time we get some publicity for this goddamn rap shit.
A lot of the theaters that ran the Kung Fu movies at this time, they were inner city theaters. A lot of the suburban kids, basically white kids, parents were not comfortable having them go into the city. So why not put these on television?
When they expanded beyond 42nd Street into the commercial TV stations, then everybody got it.
In Philadelphia, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Cincinnati, Honolulu.
People will be outside all day long. They came inside to watch those kung fu movies.
That then inspired another generation of kids like we were in the 70s, and they got addicted and plugged into the whole phenomenon.
Journey to the mysterious world of the Far East, the wondrous and wicked world of the Kung Fu Masters.
I discovered my love of these films on television. I think the first one I watched was Boxer from Shantung. So I still have not seen anything on commercial TV as bloody as that movie. Chen Quan Tai fights the whole last 10 minutes of the movie with an axe hanging out of his stomach. On a Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, it was still outrageous.
The reasons why they were good for kids, because they basically show that if you're disciplined and you're prepared to study, there isn't anything that you can't achieve, which we know basically is nonsense.
Hello, I'm Ron Van Cleef, and welcome to Drive-In Movie. The Chinatown Kid is today's feature starring Alexander Fu Sheng.
Now they're aiming for him.
They were English export. They were being done in Hong Kong, so you have a lot of English accents being dubbed.
You bums obviously don't know me.
Oh, I know you. You're one of Lou's men, the one they say can kick like a mule.
We will take the piss out of dubbed movies. Hey, where do you think you're going?
What do you mean over there, huh? Yeah.
My kung fu is better than yours. It's...
When we were dubbing them, we would grunt, we would make terrible noises. They took 10, 12 hours to dub. There was one film we did, we drank 72 beers between 6 of us. We must have been drunk.
Trusted to me or the... Very good. Can you make it a bit more Chinese-y? That was a bit English, that one.
I was trying to write the thing and trying to make the voices fit the lips.
You say you'll make them say what you want them to say. Surely they've got to say what they are saying. It doesn't make sense.
No,
they can be saying anything at all.
You must be tired of living was a favourite. Those words used to fit the lips.
The lips go so many times, so many times, so many times.
My favourite of all time was the one-armed swordsman, and I got him to say, "I'm going to kill you with my own 2 hands." God knows it wasn't perfect. Some of the time it wasn't even average.
Unicorn! Left, then right.
Fearless hyena. I did the Jackie Chan voice in it, and I saw it quite recently.
What have I been teaching you? Study and act with thought. What else? Train hard to help others.
Frankly, I was horrified. I could only watch 10 minutes of it. I felt embarrassed.
Why the hell did you attack me?
As the 70s became the 80s and the Hong Kong economy was booming, Shaw missed the bus again. Someone came to Shaw Brothers with this guy, Jackie Chan. Do you want this guy? He's really funny, he's really popular. Shaw said no thanks.
That was the biggest mistake. It's like not signing the Beatles, right?
He went off to Golden Harvest, where they had realized that what people really, really wanted were kung fu comedies, and people were eating it up. Yuen Woo-ping directed a movie called Snake and Eagle's Shadow with Jackie Chan as a young boy at a martial arts school who runs errands and cleans up.
You've no idea!
Who gets taught how to be a real fighter. This really was the first big hit kung fu comedy.
Jackie Chan was not the next Bruce Lee.
We don't need another Bruce Lee. I'm going to make it my own.
You must attract the audience, see the movie, then story, then comedy.
And he was funny, and like his personality just exploded on screen.
If no violence, no action, not difficult stunt, no people come to see it.
Jackie Chan always said he was inspired by Buster Keaton, with all his stunts, which inspired him to do the comedy action that he's doing.
Roll and action!
You want the audiences to see someone fall 40 feet with nothing to catch them at the bottom.
The stunt is my life. Movie is my life.
The joke was always we didn't have money for special effects. We had to be the special effect.
How do you appeal to the world? Well, you make yourself the fall guy.
I'm not crazy.
That's genius.
And you look at what Jackie Chan did with space. Hello.
Doing an entire sequence in a wide shot so you can see it's all them.
You would run all over the set, and not just that set, but you'd move on to another set and another set after that.
Jackie created his own style, uses acrobatic abilities, and he learned how to scale walls quickly or jump over a table, come back, slide on a table, flip over, do things like that. Which, to me, is the precursor to parkour.
For me, we live in society, we like box and we like squared and everything, so okay, it's safer. So for me, escape was better. Getting outside, doing something else. We find something positive to do. For me, it's all about energy, it's like vibration. It's in my head forever. It's like, this is part of who I am. Watching also martial art movie, Jackie Chan is a huge influence, and he inspired us. It was like he planted a seed in us. As a kids, where we grew up, like the Dame du Lac, which is a very iconic structure, allow us to practice like a tool, like a wooden dummy. When it just fuels you, like give you so much energy, and that's what all this movie did for me.
When you see parkour, you know, it's no different than Jackie Chan getting chased around town.
Parkour felt like wire work without the wires.
It makes you think like supernatural exists. Tic-tac, passe-muraille, we call wall run. So you change your environment. A wall is no more wall, a bench is no more bench. Jackie Chan, you see, he uses the environment. That's what we do, we use the environment. We initiate a fashion phenomenon. We're responsible for this crazy fame of this discipline. But there is people also allow us to do that. It's a link. We are inspired, and then we're inspired.
In the 80s, Hong Kong movies started moving into the modern times with people like Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, except their stars now were white-collar workers.
The plot was irrelevant. It was all about how are we going to get from this acrobatic scene to this comedy scene, all with kung fu.
Those guys would start bringing this idea of, well, a stuntman also needs to know falls, jumps, how to go through a window or a wall.
You hope to show the audience something new in every film. I wanted them to be happy when they watched my films.
There's nobody better than Sammo Hung. That guy's the most incredible action director I've ever worked with. In Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, Sammo said, you swing the chair at my legs and I'll do somersault and land on my feet. Honestly, I'm like, where's the stunt double? Of course, Sammo did it like 30 freaking times, and you know how he's built. Jackie made a comment once, he looks like an elephant but moves like a monkey.
Sammo Hung was concerned with impact. He wanted things to hit hard.
As hard as he hit you, he wanted you to hit him just as hard back.
Painful?
They put camera here and I have to put my head into frame, and Sammo, boom, bare-fisted uppercut. I remember after the first few days of my fight scene with Sammo, if I can get through this, I can get through anything.
People wanted modern-day movies. Golden Harvest cleaned up with their action comedy series set in the modern day. And Shaw Brothers was just one beat behind what audiences wanted. And so slowly Shaw faded and faded, till eventually Shaw Brothers died in 1986, when basically television production took over the Clearwater Bay sound stages. They abandoned actually Lau Kar Lung, who was shooting a movie. They just sort of left him there. We're shutting down production, good luck. They moved over into TVB full-time and made more millions of dollars there, becoming the biggest and most powerful producer of television martial arts dramas, period dramas, romances, and contemporary cop shows. One thing Golden Harvest understood in a way that Shaw Brothers didn't is that you had to constantly have fresh faces. Go overseas, hold auditions, and see what was out there.
In karate, I'm number one. And Kentucky Fried Chicken is number one in chicken. It's got the taste that...
I was 5-time karate world champion. The editor of Inside Kung Fu magazine said, hey, there's a Chinese company here. They're in Los Angeles and they're auditioning. They're looking for the next Bruce Lee. I did some fighting, I did self-defense, I did some weapons, and Corey Yun says, I want the girl. My first movie was Yes, Madam in Hong Kong, and I was like, what do I do? I never shot a film before.
Cool it!
Stay away! Gun! We're all killer!
Nothing was in English. I didn't know what I was saying. I remember just going, Yithing, humma, 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 humma. And they go, cut, that's good. And I was like, no, I said humma, 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 humma. They said, doesn't matter. Corey Yun was such an innovator to take a chance with 2 women.
Let's see how good you ladies are.
Final fight with her and Michelle Yao together, side by side, is just mind-blowing.
Their internal power emanates out of them through the lens to you in the audience. And it's like, yeah.
The movie was a success, and I signed a 3-picture deal with Golden Harvest.
So what about you, lady? You want to try my kung fu?
Of course I want to try it, you piece of shit.
There's a big difference between shooting Hong Kong and an American. We never had a script. I remember I was shooting The Magic Crystal, and the director said to me, look at the ceiling. And I said, oh, boy, why am I looking at the ceiling? He goes, oh, don't worry about it. When I see the movie, we're getting invaded by aliens, and they're attacking us. And I was like, that might have been a little bit important information to tell me.
And did you see the alien when it came out? It looked like some kid had made it out of, like, plasticine or something. No! No! I did that with Cynthia Rothrock, who I've done 9 movies with.
And I always tell people, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're with a partner that isn't good, you're not going to look good. If you did a movie then and you weren't a good fighter, that was not going to sell because people could tell if you could fight or not.
The fight has highs and lows. It has nouns and verbs and adverbs and adjectives. That's what's important in a fight scene.
One of the toughest careers is doing Hong Kong movies. You get hurt.
Hong Kong action is grueling.
There's a stunt in a movie, it's called Pantyhose Hero, where you see Sammo Hung get hit by a car and you see his body move in ways a body shouldn't move. And I'm like, oh, how long did you go to the hospital for? Oh, I didn't go.
That's why Hong Kong's action films are so unique. Safety is not really the first major concern.
I mean, there's a scene where Jackie's going to blow the top 3 floors off these buildings. They've got 15 cameras, so eventually action, boom! The whole thing's blown off. Next minute, people are running, grabbing cameras. Quick, come on, quickly, quickly. And I get dragged into a car to get out of there because I hadn't told anybody. Because they knew if they asked for permission, they wouldn't get it, so they just did it.
Stunt coordinator is such a tough job. So on this scene, crazy guys, they wanted to kidnap the girl, and they just grabbed the kid's hair, and then the car back off. We show it to the parents first, to gain parents' permission, and then, okay, just do it. In Hollywood, you couldn't do that.
These guys lay their lives on the line every day to give us the cinematic beauty.
And the doctor goes, oh yeah, you jumbled your internal organs. And I'm like, what? I jumbled my internal organs? What does that mean?
He actually knocked my tooth out. Boom, my tooth is rattling around my head. Sam was like, put it in your pocket, let's go back to work.
They were supposed to land onto the car, not the road. 3 months in hospital, they're back at work.
You know, in a Hong Kong movie, if the action director says he's going to set fire to you and throw you down the stairs, you've got to roll with it.
So I have to fall off from the flyover and then land on the moving truck and then bounce off to the moving van. I stay on the flyover 7 nights, every single night, to try to fall in love with this stunt. It was so dangerous and so tough. The director wanted me to do one more time. What's wrong with that one? When I go home, my mom asked me, you sure this is your long-term, career or what? Okay, I said yes.
For a stunty to be a part of their stunt team, you would do whatever it took. Often that meant getting the absolute shit kicked out of you. Like in Twinkle, they were real rackets, they weren't balsa-wood or anything. The stunt guy, he's in the corner, he's like this. I said, oh my God, he's gonna die.
You don't have a mark on you. Let's make it worthwhile.
And yes, madam, Corey Yun kept saying, hit him harder, hit him harder. And the guys go, no, don't hit me harder, it hurts.
Madam, I think it's had enough for now.
When I went and did my first American picture, they're like, don't hit so hard. This is in Hong Kong. My films in America, most of them went direct to video.
There are some places in this world
I can't see you back there,
where a pretty girl should never walk alone
but I can feel you.
unless her name is China O'Brien.
It was such a iconic character that people started calling me China.
In the U.S. and made movies like China O'Brien.
She's one of them chop suey fighters.
Which was really trying to capture an audience they knew was out there, but they weren't gonna fight for them in movie theaters. They knew they could get these people in video stores, which were everywhere.
The VHS era comes in, and then you have a whole nother wave of people seeing these kung fu films.
People's necks have been split and their hands been chopped off.
They had a hungry audience that wanted 20, 30, 40 action movies a year.
It was the video boom when I was growing up. There's a local video shop right by the house. I would watch 3 films a day and then go back to the video store and get 3 more.
What made people kind of rent a movie was usually the cover art. And I did Equalizer 2000 with this Corinne Wall, and she's kind of almost naked, and I'm bare-chested. And oh. But that's kind of what you had to do to sell the movie,
Finally, a major martial arts movie starring the greatest kickboxers in the world.
There was a time where if you could throw a kick, okay, we'll put him in a movie. You had the Van Dammes, you had the Don Wilsons.
Don Wilson is, quite frankly, a one-man army.
All my posters used to say, World Kickboxing Champion Don the Dragon Wilson.
Don Wilson is the greatest kickboxer of all time.
They had these physical guys doing these very physical movies, and the acting wasn't so important.
World karate champion Billy Blanks.
Don Wilson asked if I would play a part in his movie, Blood Fist. And I went, wow, it's a blessing that Don Wilson was doing a movie. I'm not a great actor, but the goal is to be able to take my martial arts and make it be so good that people don't even see my act.
I became what they call a video star. I was doing up to 5 movies a year, though. Theirs were not theatrical releases, they were direct-to-video.
In Time magazine, they had me and Don Wilson as the top video sellers of that time.
I would go around the country for a month, going to individual video stores and just meeting the public.
I met Cynthia Rothrock at Blockbusters, told her my aspirations, that I wanted to do what she did and get into the movies, and she signed a picture saying, I'll see you in the movies. There's loads of guys like me that were inspired by these films. Okay, I want to be one of these guys. That's the goal.
With the inception of VHS, now we had the power
When we were trying to learn how to make these films, we would watch fight scenes frame by frame.
Slowly fast forward to that spot.
Pause, rewind, go slow.
Which causes the tape to kind of degrade after a while.
A film like Wheels on Meals, for example, okay, so it's over Jackie's shoulder and the shot changes at this point.
This was individuals controlling their entertainment for the first time.
What's happening in Los Angeles that brings thousands of people to the hottest training center in the country? Here's a hint.
And Jane Fonda was the top aerobic instructor at the time. Her studio where she was teaching was probably 2 miles from my house. So I would go down and look in the window and watch her teach classes, right?
Hi, I'm Billy Blanks, coming to you with your first Taebo workout.
So then I started taking kung fu moves, calisthenic moves, boxing. I started blending it all together. And then I decided I'm gonna come up with something called Taebo.
Join the millions of people all over the world and become part of the Taebo fitness revolution.
It became the most popular video in the world. It sold more videos than the movie Titanic. It sold over 115 million copies.
How you guys feel?
Or Taebo Gold, a workout specifically designed for the exercise needs of men and women over 40.
The circumstances are unique. The agreement is unique. It is right that we should feel a sense of history, of pride, and of confidence in the future.
The mid-90s are an interesting time in Hong Kong because of the upcoming handover to mainland China.
The infrastructure in the Hong Kong film business had changed. Things were slowly moving to the mainland, and the Hong Kong film industry really was a hit or miss at that time.
Hong Kong was making close to 300 movies a year. This is from a city with fewer than 9 million people. It is a scale of overproduction that is hard to comprehend. By '99, when the Asian economic crisis hit, Hong Kong suddenly dropped to making fewer than 50 movies per year. People were out of work everywhere.
There was a transitional period where filmmakers got a bit lost in the action cinema. They didn't know where to go.
And then you have a flood of these Hong Kong performers and directors coming into the US.
The people that I had grown up with in the Hong Kong film industry were now coming over to join the Hollywood film industry.
Executives or agents that were trying to quickly catch up, like, oh, how do we make sense of this?
Like, okay, who are these guys? Like, they obviously have market appeal.
They were in a fishbowl of sorts where everyone's sort of finding them fascinating, but at the same time,
not really understanding why they were good, what they could do.
Then Wu Yuping came in and changed the game.
I know Kung Fu. Show me.
When the Wachowskis went to Yuen Woo-ping, they said, we want you to choreograph the action. And I said, okay, well, but I need to train the actors for like 3 to 6 months.
The challenge is how we can make these people look as though they know they are born with the skills.
And what happened? Everybody loves those fight scenes. There's a reason that they love them.
If you want Hong Kong style action, the actors gotta do it themselves.
The Matrix made Kung Fu look cool. It was the ultimate 90s movie, and it was infused with the spirit of Hong Kong film.
One of the things that we love about Hong Kong action is the way that they shoot fight scenes with long takes and wider angles. But they also do this wire work. Everybody has a superhuman and supernatural grace.
After Matrix came out, and he's going, do you know how to do this wire work stuff? It's like, yeah, well, I tried talking to you about that 5, 6, 7 years ago, but you didn't want to do it.
It helped permeate the idea that Hong Kong visual sense was really important in cutting-edge technology in film.
And that was the moment in America where Hong Kong movies became cool.
You know, nobody in that audience going, what does he mean by Kung Fu? It's super pop culture in your face. Everyone knows it.
Yuen Woo-ping was suddenly the biggest name anywhere. He would go on to do Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Ang Lee, the director, who was Taiwanese American, really wanted to do the movies of his boyhood.
They're using the history, but then adding a much more high-gloss production values to it.
But Couch Tagger is different. Go back to the Come Drink With Me, but he improved a lot.
One of the reasons why it appealed to international audiences is to really show people a hidden secret Chinese world that no one had a glimpse of beforehand.
We introduced the Western world, like, oh, wow, look at this. Yet they were doing that for 20 years in Hong Kong cinema.
Michelle Yeoh, her fight scene with Zhang Ziyi, one of my favorite fights of all time.
To see two women at the top of their games was so wonderful. Very strong, powerful women, also very graceful and elegant.
The choreography was beautiful, yes. But it was the emotion, it was the story. That film is about love.
Actions, fantasies, romance, power.
Testosterone.
And it spoke to everyone in the world. Over $100 million box office, 4 Oscars.
Taiwanese, Hong Kong, China, and America all coming together in this one movie.
And that did sort of set the stage for all of these countries suddenly exploding and their markets blowing up and competing with Hong Kong and mainland China.
You look to Thailand, where people like Panaritacrai was seeing Hong Kong movies and making his own versions of them on VHS that he distributed himself by hand. He discovered a student named Tony Jaa, and their movies slowly got more and more slick until they wound up making Ong Bak and really putting the Thai film industry on the international map.
These are all countries that have had barbaric history and conflict, so they all hinge on different influences. You're also seeing with each one of these their own local indigenous martial arts style. In Ong Bak, the elbows to the head, that was a very different style.
If you watch Ong Bak 2, there's Tony Jaa doing Chinese Kung Fu. He's doing Dragon and Tiger and everything. It's chop socky. It is a mixture of everything.
It's a global community, and so it's like one never-ending jam session at a jazz bar.
Wherever you consider your stuntmen expendable, that's where the next big trend in action is going to come from. Things moved to Indonesia, where The Raid came out. That was where they could do it because they could do it cheap and fast and with no one looking over their shoulder.
And the funny thing is for me that Indonesian action cinema was brought back by a Welshman.
They all grew up on Hong Kong films and were like so inspired by that stuff.
That's how they learned about framing and they learned about tempo.
We can't go off and copy Hong Kong action cinema. We need to do something different and something new. If we try to emulate it, we'll come off second best.
When you see Raid, game over.
Man, how can they go farther? They're just going farther and farther and farther, but they make it convulsively watchable. And that's super cool.
One place that action filmmaking still has this visceral street-level feeling, you'll find it on YouTube.
I got my first audition from a fight video, my first lead film from a fight video. So we did one specific video called Amy versus Minnie. We wanted to create this really cool, powerful female warrior badass. The choreography, as well as the camera work, as well as the performers combined, makes magic.
Amy versus Minnie, I saw it, I remember seeing that and being like, wow, who's this? On Accident Man, Amy Johnson was the only girl that I wanted for that role, to be honest. You know, you don't often see a petite little blonde girl doing that sort of stuff, not since the days of Cynthia Rothrock, eh?
YouTube is so powerful, being able to harness each other's skills and show that to the world.
And we are shooting movies. We just did it in a different way.
The way films used to be done, it's over with. It's all changed. This digital technology has taken things to a whole new realm.
I mean, I'm glad YouTube wasn't around when I was a kid. I would have been putting out all sorts of nonsense. my career would have ended before it began.
We grew up in like the lower class side of Adelaide.
3, 2, 1, action!
We grew up backyard wrestling and beating each other up with like light tubes and barbed wire. We started recording our like backyard shows. It sort of veered off into filmmaking. We were the kids that your parents didn't let you hang out with. We started doing our own stuff for like Facebook, and that's when it blew up and started to go viral straight away. And then the YouTube just blew up, and now it's like our jobs. When we're recording, we work with a lot of parkour artists and a lot of martial artists, and like I'm in love with waifu. It's just those fight scenes, and that's when we started looking back. With every fight scene in Raka Raka, there's different styles and stuff, so we delved a lot into those original Shaw Brother films. It was the first time they used the camera as a character. Like, you felt like you were inside those fights. The sound effects of Kung Fu translated to Raka Raka very heavily. We take sound effects from those old Kung Fu films and put it into Raka Raka. Like, I love in the Kung Fu films, even if someone turns their head, everything's so safe with, I think, Western cinema, whereas those films are so raw and nuts. We were ranked the 5th most powerful figures in media for Australia. So before Nicole Kidman and after the Murdochs, between Facebook and YouTube, it'd be in the billions that the videos have been consumed or watched.
You alright? Awesome. I'm sorry, man. Well, why did you hit me? You've been hitting us all day, man. That was a pole!
This type of genre in storytelling connects. And so the platforms may change, but the underlying storylines are just so fundamental. It erases the language barrier, because you get it.
It's all part of that ongoing dialogue.
It's a great time for something like that. Everybody united in action.
It's kind of cool when you think where it started from.
And there's a message there from those movies that speaks to people who have nothing.
My girl dumped me the day I bought the wedding ring, so I was in a bar on St. Mark's Place in East Village, and to cheer me up, I'm looking at the trailer of Who Killed Captain Alex, Uganda's first action movie. It was 90 seconds. Clearly, they have no money, right? But in the West, if you have no money, you make a love story. Like, you don't make a frickin' war film. I thought it was so brilliant, and he had millions of views. I couldn't get it out of my head. I bought the cheapest ticket I could. It's like a 28-hour trip, airport to airport. So we get on the back of a motorcycle and we pull up to this little house right in front of the sewage. And there's Isaac Godfrey Nabwana, founder of Hollywood. And I say, hello, my name's Alan. I'm from New York City, and I'd just like to talk to you. And he looks at me, he's like, all right. And that was it.
Join us.
And then 2 weeks later, I became a Ugandan action movie star.
Let's go.
Forget your wife in America. She hates you. That's my friend was Pupu. This is Uganda. Pupu everywhere.
I've gotten horribly sick where I'm like vomiting out my ass, shitting out my mouth. And that terrifies them. They were like, you know, what are we gonna do with a dead white guy? I was adopted by the Nchima clan. Like, my name now is Alan Sali Oe Nchima Musaja Waka Baka Nemefani Yesu Muganda Laptop Hofmanis. Around 1981-82, around that period, was the first time in over a generation where, like, the country was open to outside influences and culture, like hip-hop, but then also movies. But then when violence erupted, schools were pretty much closed forever. And so how do you learn? Like, how do you take it seriously in Uganda when you're 14? In the beginning, it's the movies.
It is from inside this sprawling slum that Uganda's best-known action films director, Isaac Nabwana, makes his films.
I used to like Chinese Kung Fu very much, and I thought of making a Kung Fu movie. We just wanted to transform from Chinese Kung Fu to Ugandan Kung Fu.
We need to do that. We need to show the world what African Kung Fu is.
I think I need more Kung Fu in my movies because Kung Fu is loved over here by my audience.
Isaac, I think, is a crazy blend of Hong Kong with commandos, but it's in a blender of Uganda, where there's Bruce Yu, the Ugandan Bruce Lee.
Inspired by Bruce Lee and Chinese movies. I love Kung Fu.
Isaac, I think, is a genius on a world level because he's a real storyteller. And Isaac says that, like, yeah, I've seen violence, okay? I'm old enough, I know it, okay? You know what violence is, Alan? Violence is when the soldiers come into the village, they point at your father, you hear 2 shots behind the shed, and you never see him again. That's violence. It's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is life lessons. So we got the actors together and they said, what if we make a Kung Fu movie with our own kids? Something where there's kidnappers, because we're really afraid of kidnappers, but they could fight back. They're tough in this. So if there's a real-life kidnapper, they may think twice about stealing our own children. And so we made this, The Crazy World is as a child Kung Fu film, where the kids are the action stars, in a hope that it may save their lives one day. You just sense some kind of dedication to something bigger than themselves. And when I first went to Uganda, I really felt the same way. I'm convinced that there's going to be some kid in a village in northern India who's going to see a Kung Fu film from a village in Africa, and in 2 seconds, understand the conditions those films were made. And in 20 years, we're going to know that kid's name.